There is a sense of inevitability at the moment behind Boris Johnson's campaign. How can you possibly catch him?
Because I want to make an argument that what Boris is offering, a hard stop at any cost on the 31st of October, means that he is effectively committing the country to no deal, because we have holidays over the summer, we have a new European Commission, we have very few parliamentary sitting days, or an election, if Parliament chooses to stop that. And my argument is, are those really the best options, those very stark choices between a no-deal Brexit or an election? Are they really the best that we as Conservatives can offer the country? And if I was chosen, I'd be the first Prime Minister who's been an entrepreneur. I'm a negotiator. I believe it is possible to offer better choices. That's what negotiators do, and that's why I'm standing.
Now, you say, therefore, that you could reopen the negotiations and get a better deal. Can I put it to you, there is not a shred of evidence that anybody on the other side of the argument is prepared to do that. Have you got any evidence at all that anybody's prepared to do this?
I believe that there is a deal there. I think there is evidence when you talk to Europe. Well, let me answer the question, Andrew. When you talk to European leaders, as I do, they want to solve this problem. They say that if they were approached by a British Prime Minister, someone they were willing to deal with, who had ideas as to how to solve the Northern Irish border, they would be willing to renegotiate the package. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be easy, but my point is simply this. If we are saying now that we're going to choose headlong a no-deal Brexit on the 31st of October or an election, those are very stark choices. Are they the best for Britain? And I'm sitting here arguing that we can negotiate better choices and offer those to the British people.
We are already at the nub of the argument. Can I ask you directly whether the French President Emmanuel Macron or Angela Merkel of Germany has ever said to you privately that they are prepared to reopen the withdrawal agreement?
What they've said is they are prepared to look at the whole package. And, in particular, they're prepared to look at whether you could get much more detail onto the future relationship. Potentially that could be legally binding, let's see, but much more detail so that you don't need a backstop. And I think the heart of the issue here is that we will not get...
They have indicated to you they could reopen the backstop.
They have said that they would be prepared to look at a deal that meant we didn't need a backstop. And what I'm saying is, should we not try? I'm not saying this is going to be easy, but, what they say is, if you've got an idea, we don't have a border with the Republic of Ireland, you do. And if you've got an idea, then we'll look at it. And if you approach them with the right Prime Minister, someone they're prepared to talk to, prepared to negotiate with, then I think if we unite as a Conservative Party, we can find a deal that can get through. And I'm an optimist, Andrew. I'm not prepared to give up right now. I think this is very, very stark, saying we're going to plunge headlong out of the EU without a deal on the 31st of October. We should look and see if there are alternatives.
I understand that. The reason that I'm intrigued by this is that both Macron and Merkel have said such different things in public about this. President Macron said very recently, under no circumstances and under no conditions will there be any renegotiation of the withdrawal agreement. And Angela Merkel has said, we have made it clear that the withdrawal agreement will not be changed. And then you go to the Irish side, you've been mentioning the Irish side, Leo Varadkar, the Taoiseach, says, if we don't have the backstop, there is no deal. A time limit is effectively saying there could be a hard border once that time limit expires, and that isn't a backstop. And again, they've said the same kind of things. So are you really suggesting they're saying something privately to you that's very different from that?
No, they are very...
That could hardly be more explicit, could it?
That is what they're saying, but they're also saying privately and indeed publicly that they will look at the package. And what I'm saying at this moment, when we have the chance to choose a Prime Minister who has been an entrepreneur and negotiator all his life inside government and outside government, is this the moment to give up on getting a deal that we can get through the House of Commons? This is so important for our country. I don't pretend, and I would never pretend, that this is going to be easy, but nor is it impossible. Look, if we do this, it's not impossible to do it before the 31st of October, but it will be difficult. And that's why I'm not prepared to commit.
It is almost impossible. There are 3 negotiating weeks left, and then all the legislation to do as well in October. It's almost impossible to get this through before the end of October. You've hinted at an extension. A lot of Conservatives watching this want to know, if Jeremy Hunt becomes Prime Minister, what is the final date by which he will certainly have left the EU?
are always telling me in politics that things are impossible. This time last year, people said it would be impossible to have a peace process in Yemen. They said it would be impossible to solve the junior doctors' contract dispute. They said it would be impossible to make a success of the London Olympics. So, politics is about, well...
By when?
I'm not committing to a 31st of October hard stop at any costs, because I don't think you can make that guarantee. And if you do make that guarantee, and if you go with the wrong approach, then you are committing us to nothing other than a hard Brexit, a no-deal Brexit. So
can you commit to us definitely being out by the end of this year?
Look, a wise Prime Minister makes choices on the basis of the choices that are actually in front of them. Now, by the time we get to the 31st of October, we may have Parliament having changed the law in particular ways. We may have a new European Commission. We may have made very good progress in the negotiations and about to sign. I've been very clear. If there is no prospect on the 31st of October, and let me say this, Andrew, if there is no prospect of getting a deal that can get through Parliament on the 31st of October, then I would be prepared to leave without a deal. Because in the end, the risk of no Brexit,
the other side of that,
is far worse than the risk of no deal. But
the other side of that, if there is a prospect, by when do you get us out? That's my question.
How can anyone sensibly answer that question when you don't know the context? And I'm not going to sit
here
and
make promises. So we could be still in by the time of the next election?
No, that is completely unacceptable. I think this is the way we deliver Brexit, and I've said to you very clearly, if there's no prospect of a good deal after we start talking to them, then we would leave without a deal. But I don't think we need to be offering that stark choice now.
You become Prime Minister. One of the things that is in your power as Prime Minister, looking at how the negotiations are going on, is to ask for an extension. My question to you is very straightforward and very simple. How long do you ask for?
You can't answer that question until you know the choices you face. You're asking me to predict what the world will look like on October the 31st. And you must know, Andrew, that is a ridiculous thing to ask a Prime Minister or someone who wants to be Prime Minister to decide when you don't know what choices there are. If there's no prospect of a deal, then I'm out. But if there is a prospect of a deal, and what I'm saying, the difference between me and Boris is that I'm saying I would try for a deal. I'm not going to create a set of circumstances that makes it all but impossible to get a deal, because I think we should be offering the country some better choices.
Brexiteers in your party will be watching this with some dismay, because they'll be saying, there you go, Boris Johnson, whatever you think of him, is offering us something different. He's offering us a clear, determined promise that we will be out by the 31st of October, come what may. Jeremy Hunt was a Remainer, and he's still got deep down Remainer instincts, and he is really the continuity candidate. In the cruel words you yourself have used, he's Theresa May in trousers.
Continuity is not the same as loyalty. I'm proud to have been loyal to two Prime Ministers. I would be completely different to both. And with my background as a negotiator, I had profound issues with Theresa May's approach, which I argued privately in Cabinet. I did not think that we should be trying to persuade Parliament to accept the backstop, but of course she made that decision and I supported that loyalty. This is a different approach. This is saying we have to change the backstop and we have to leave the European Union if we possibly can in an orderly way, and I believe that I'm the person that can do that.
Because you have not been consistent in your views on this, have you? You said after the referendum was over, after the 2016 referendum, that you supported us staying inside the single market. In fact, you said it was absolutely essential that we remain in the single market. The British government needs to make it an explicit national objective to remain in the single market, and you have junked that.
I said that. I wrote that article a week after the referendum result. And it's no surprise to anyone that I was on the Remain side of that debate. But since then, I've been absolutely consistent that we must leave the European Union. We must leave the European Union cleanly. The people who've changed their position are the people who voted against Theresa May's deal and then voted for it. I have been consistent in voting to get us out of the European Union as quickly as possible.
But you haven't been consistent also on your view of the referendum, because again, admittedly earlier after the referendum you said the people have spoken, but we did not vote on the terms of our departure. We need to negotiate a deal and put it to the British people, either in a referendum or through a fresh general election. I think it's important that people have their say on the terms of that deal. They haven't had their say on the terms of their deal. Why shouldn't they now?
Yes, they have. You may not have noticed, but we had a general election, Andrew.
And there was no terms of the deal then?
There were two major parties who both said, including Labour actually at that stage, that we would leave the European Union, the single market and the customs union. Over 80% of the country voted for those two parties.
But we were miles away from a deal. We didn't know the terms of the deal at that point.
We did. We knew the type of Brexit we were voting for. We've had democratic endorsement. I am like millions of Remainers up and down the country who voted Remain but want us to get on with Brexit, believe we can make a great success of Brexit, believe the economy has been extremely robust since Brexit, contrary to what was pledged, but most of all because we're Democrats, and as one of the oldest democracies in the world, it's a simple matter of trust. Are we the kind of country where the people who do my sort of job do what the people tell them? And we must be that country.
Would you ever vote to bring down a Conservative government going for no deal?
No.
Can I turn you also said that you are a negotiator. That's one of your big pictures. You're a successful negotiator. And you mentioned a moment ago the NHS doctors. Now, that was one of the most angry, divisive, and still not forgotten disputes in the NHS history. Meanwhile, after your presiding over the NHS for a long time, the NHS experienced the worst winter crisis on its record, the biggest spending squeeze in its history. The waiting lists hit 4 million for the first time, and the flagship targets were missed for years. AE waiting times, cancer treatments, and the waiting list targets all were missed. And you had the junior doctors strike on your watch. And as I say, up and down the country, junior doctors are still livid with you personally. That's not a great record as a negotiator.
Andrew, if I'm Prime Minister, I will be the kind of Prime Minister who takes difficult decisions. I won't be someone who courts unpopularity. When I started as Health Secretary, as you know, I was the longest-serving Health Secretary by the end. I met a father who had lost his son a week old because of a mistake, a medical mistake. And the NHS does lots of wonderful things, but this was a terrible mistake. He had to write over 400 letters and emails before the NHS would tell him the truth about what happened. And that was wrong. And the culture was wrong. And I did take some difficult decisions. But by the end of my time as Health Secretary, nearly 3 million more patients were using good or outstanding hospitals compared to when I started. And yes, we did have enormous pressure in A&Es. We still have pressure in A&E because of the ageing population. And that was why I negotiated an extra £20 billion funding increase for the NHS so that we can employ...
A very, very tough historical
Of course,
squeeze.
but I negotiated that so that we could get the extra doctors, the extra nurses, the biggest increase in modern times of nurse training places and doctor training places up by a quarter. So
let me
that
ask
was a
you
record I was
one more